I guess the perception of stability is worth more than the actual dollar value now. So think about that. Credit locks up, but they need to keep everybody thinking everything's fine for as long as possible, while governments behind the scenes continue to accrue these different items. Do you think the ammunition shortage last year was just a random happenstance? Do you think this year's canned food shortages are just a random happenstance? Do you think also about 6 months ago, the complete buyout of all the long-term food storage from all American producers was just random happenstance? That's governments preparing behind the scenes, but they got to keep the perception of stability.
Interesting. Well, first of all, thank you for coming on, David. It's a really a special treat for me. And I like your research and following you. I think that you have the tenacity that I think with many people that try to bring out the facts that you have to have. You just have to be tenacious. And hey, I'm looking forward to it. So thank you for being on.
Yeah, I've been watching your stuff as well, and you have a lot of really good ideas out there that kind of mesh in. If we're taking a wider scope look than just an individual, like laser point focus, it seems that a lot of what you talk about and a lot of what I talk about seem to sync together, and that's why I thought tonight's conversation was going to be just like nonstop between, you know, ideas bouncing back and forth that are building off of each other as we move through the conversation tonight.
Yeah. Listen, I was, as you heard prior to coming in here, you know, I've been giving some thought as we were talking about the world now is wired. It's literally wired all the way around, and how many other times. Fiber optics, I was just talking about that. You know, I was involved in, made a lot of money in that market. But the interesting thing is that when you begin to look at entities, in my case, as I look at, we're in a physical realm. There is a ether realm, call it the spirit realm. We're all heading to there. I mean, that's the inevitability of the trip here. But I contend that we're not alone on this planet. I think that there is a much higher intelligence that is orchestrating so much of what we're seeing effects of today. And when I began to think about fiber optics, you know, that's a perfect place if you're talking about light as a means of a carrier wave. I think it could be very well possible that you could easily have an identity attached to that. Just a thought.
No, I'd seen the episode where you talked about that in depth, and I thought that was a great analysis. And then I started thinking about that. If we're talking about an extra dimensional entity that is so intelligent that it had us as humans construct the medium for it to live in, and now we're coming into 5G, which is a much higher frequency that would allow that, what you're talking about, that light band or that frequency wave, to actually leave the medium of copper wiring, of fiber optic cabling, and actually come out into the air space around us with this frequency that we are creating for it yet again in a grid of frequency outside of constraints of what it's wrapped in these tiny little, I don't know, fiber optic cables that you're talking about. But this next step into 5G, for me, is I see it as a control mechanism when the food riots come during this grand solar minimum. But at the same time, I also see it taking a step up and bringing entities ushering into this world. And you know, I can go in a couple different directions with that. But when we bring this thing into physical fruition, I think it's going to be difficult to put the genie back in the bottle on that.
I'm going to, they're building, we found 3 now of these 5G. They're not towers. They're towers, but they're unlike anything I've ever seen. I told people yesterday, they actually have their own cooling system. They require a great deal of energy. When they were they're still installing them. The electric company here is putting in separate lines. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, this doesn't look normal. This doesn't look, it doesn't feel right. But so we're about to find out here. They said they'll have them turned on next year.
All of the towers require the cooling boxes. There's 2 cooling boxes underneath each tower. And from what I've been told, if even one of those boxes was be disconnected from its cooling source that the entire tower would catch on fire.
And I'm thinking the radiation, I don't know, maybe that I contend that that may be an energy source. The fact that 5G is putting off this radiation that we now, it's very detectable. But yeah, I'd like to talk about where you see things coming. My wife and I, we've been a prepper for decades. It's just, you know, call us the Boy Scout model, be prepared. It's interesting as I begin to see the futures, particularly looking at China, looking at what's happening here in the U.S. Crop yields are going down, and you see, what I see is eventually a complete collapse of the food distribution because of the growing ability itself.
We'd have to couple that with the economy as well. If there's a lockup in credit, then that food supply delivery chain is also going to cease. So we have kind of a double pincer approach in here, is everything that runs on this planet is revolving on credit. It could be a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day no out. But if that contracts like it did in 2008 and 9, what was one of the first things to go after the contraction started and the banks failed and things started to get pulled on the derivatives out there, and we saw those collapses across X, Y, and Z, commodities price crashes. Everybody lost their available access to credit. Now that was great for 2008 and 9 because that just affected commodities pretty much. But now we're coming into incredibly low yields, and I do think the USDA and other governments around the world are working in tandem to give the perception of stability. I think the monetary value of fiat or whatever might be considered monetary value is going to be reset in a couple of years anyway. Yeah, I guess the perception of stability is worth more than the actual dollar value now. So think about that. Credit locks up, but they need to keep everybody thinking everything's fine for as long as possible while governments behind the scenes continue to accrue these different items. Do you think the ammunition shortage last year was just a random happenstance? Do you think this year's canned food shortages are just a random happenstance? Do you think also about 6 months ago, the complete buyout of all the long-term food storage from all American producers was just random happenstance? That's governments preparing behind the scenes, but they got to keep the perception of stability.
Got a greater war around you, by the way, buddy. So let's talk about.
You can see an aura around, huh?
Yeah, I can.
What color is it?
It's a beautiful light blue. Almost has more white to it. Yeah, it's quite beautiful. Anyway, so I come out of the financial markets. That was my background. I designed payment systems. And when I began to see in 2011 the monetization of our debt, the U.S. debt, and which has never abated, we're seeing the inverted yield curves, which are all saying the credit situation is off the hand. Now, they've tried under the Obama administration, they did a little three-card Monte game, is that, as you know, they took certain things out of the CPI and said, well, those things really don't count. And it gave the false appearance that the inflation rate had stabilized, which was anything but true. When I knew that we were doing this last evening, I was in the grocery store. And I find it remarkable now that in my lifetime, when I was 10 years old, a gallon of milk cost 25 cents. I was in the grocery store last night. It's over $6. Now, that's incredible. Then I'll just add one more thing. We saw this, Lynn and I did. I cook a lot, and I like peas. And when I found out what you were saying, and I told Lynn, I said, there's a connection here. All the peas literally disappeared. I mean, there was a shortage of them, still is, until we found out why. Do you know peas are the closest thing to animal protein that we can consume?
I did not know that. That's a great fact, though. Keep that in mind, anybody listening. They talk about soybeans for one, but the peas, that's great information.
I did not know this. And so Yeah, and this is really the interesting thing. Almost overnight, some buyer, they don't know who, literally swallowed up. You couldn't find them. I mean, yeah.
Now think of this also, when people go to start shopping this Christmas season, most people haven't come in to buy pumpkin mix since last year, or dried cranberries, or dried fruits that they're going to use in different kind of cakes and pastries and things that are, might roll out once a year in the kitchen. It's been a whole year since they went in to buy them last. So I would think that this year, in my personal opinion, that these prices are going to be double or triple what they remember last year, because when you're thinking about the food pipeline, there's an enormous amount of grains still coming through, because you can hold those grains for a whole year in the silo. Yields pretty good were last year, so they still had some left over. But when you think about fresh vegetables, peas, carrots, tomatoes, any kind of lettuce or pumpkins, you generally don't keep those for a full year in the pipeline. You don't hold heads of lettuce for a whole year in storage and then bring it into the market now, right?
No.
So think about those things that don't have a pipeline, that are just beholden to this year's growth season, and that's it. So we're going to start to see, and we already are seeing shortages. I tell you what, every day I'm getting 3-4 messages of people talking about how scrappy the produce looks, or how small it is in comparison, or how tasteless it is when they take it home to cook it. Even it's small, scrappy, and it's still tasteless. So I'm getting report after report after report after report, daily coming through. And it can't just be like, wow, it's in one part of the country. It seems to be global as well. And a lot of people do right from the U.S. and Europe, Canada, etc. But I get reports from Australia, New Zealand. They're all saying the same thing.
And the trick, and folks, go and check your grocery stores and look at this. So how the illusion works. This is magic, by the way, because we fall for it. What they've done in cereal, and I happen to like organic cereal, the packaging is getting smaller, but the price is going up. So it gives you the illusion that, well, the shelves look to be stocked, but really they're dealing with reduced amounts.
There's a proper name for that. It's called shrinkflation.
Oh,
there's a proper term for that. Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, shrinkflation. I've done a couple videos on it, and it seems to be maybe the intermediate step between total shortages, where they keep trying to squeeze it down. Like you say, the perception that there's still goods in the store.
Mm-hmm.
But I would ask anybody out there to please be mindful when you walk into the store shelves. Like you and I, we go in there and there's 15 kinds of canned fruits are also having a very difficult time. You can't hold fruit for a very long time in the pipeline either for produce. So take a look sometimes they'll take something that's in stock and they'll spread it over the entire shelf just to give the illusion that there's still, something on the shelf. But there used to be 5 choices where there's now 1 choice of something because it's dried up, literally.
What do you see in your region of the world? I mean, because, the concept of the grocery store is now spread throughout the industrialized world. Are you seeing in the local areas the same type of decreases, I would say, in the food?
I always shop at the local market and I visit the farmers market, and I know the farmers around here, so I buy directly from them, or I buy from the wholesalers, or there's a couple stores near me here where they contact directly with the farmers, and they have all the freshest vegetables there. They have duck eggs, quail eggs, geese or goose eggs, along with chicken eggs, etc. I like to go more to the more wholesale type of real healthy food farmers market. But I tell you one thing that's disappeared: pork has disappeared. And if you do get it, it's really expensive. You get a real small piece.
Interesting.
Yeah, the swine flu over in China has really put everybody off pork. I mean, do you really want to maybe take the chance of buying pork that's infected with swine flu? Hey, that's just so tasty. Wow, I'll take 2. I mean, talk about demand destruction. It's almost like, and if I could throw a story, can I throw a story?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
In China, they killed 300 million pigs so far. That's a large
haven't heard any of this, by the way, over here. This is news to me. Okay,
well, let me run you through the whole thing, what's happened. The transition is occurring right now. So the swine industry was massive. I mean, huge in China. They were taking so much of the soy press cake and the, you know, the soy residuals and the soybean itself, the meal, everything to bring it in for food, and anything they could get, they were bringing in for pork production. Well, over this last 3 or 4 months, they've killed 300 million pigs. And some of these videos are so disturbing, I couldn't watch the rest of them on how they were killing these pigs. I mean, you know, being a human and looking at how they were, just horrific. But what the Chinese government has done now is they gave the people a choice. The pig farmers had choice. You have to wait 3 years for the contamination period. You cannot revert and grow any, you couldn't bring ducks in or chickens because that can jump species. So you had to wait 3 full years before you could come back in production again. Or they had a turnkey system to bring in and allow you to start fish farming. They had all the engineers, they would come in and build it for you. They would train you how to, you know, farm the fish. They gave you the feed, gave you the meal, everything's free. The loan is a 0% interest loan. I think it's like a 20-year loan, you don't have to pay back. The pipeline's set for you for the feed to come into your farm, and they also found buyers for your fish. So you really are just, they needed your land to get the fish farming. Now you've got to think about protein since you mentioned it. Protein. If you can't grow pigs or raise pigs, fish grow 5 times faster and use 18 times less food inside that whole process to get out a kilogram of protein. So it grows 5 times faster and using 18 times less on the input. That's approximate for the input on that. Now look, this is almost as if it's a planned thing to not raise suspicion. Because if they start to tell everybody on the planet, okay, we got to stop the total pork production, grand solar minimum, every grand solar minimum, the Chinese dynasties have collapsed. And I ask anybody out there to try to disprove that fact. It's a fact that I hope you try to disprove it, because you can't. No dynasty has ever lasted more than 400 years in China, period. And that's because they're on the grand solar minimum cycle of lack of food production, famine, droughts, etc., causes the overthrow and the mandate from heaven's removed from the rulers. So then they change on to the next dynasty. Usually takes about 35 to 40 years. The riots come in, everybody's unhappy. Emperor can't provide for the people, they're overthrown, it comes in, they burn everything to the ground, and they start over. Takes about 40 years. Hey, that's about how long we're going to be going through this whole year too. Imagine that. So it's almost like the Chinese or somebody helped them engineer a virus, because that virus is really strange anyway. The kill rate was nearly 100%. It was like 99.9% kill rate. Now, nothing in nature does that. Usually there's a 1%, 2% survival rate on any kind of natural virus. But when you're getting this kind of kill rate coming through, nearly 100%, it's almost like it was engineered. And again, the whole stability thing, and again, you kill, the demand destruction happened immediately. Because I'm over here going, I don't want, you know, virus-laden pork.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine the rest of the planet. That's demand destruction, instant demand destruction, wiping out the full need for soybeans. So now that China thought they had leverage on the United States, like, oh, we don't need your soy anymore, we're going to transition to fish farming. Now you can see where we are. Now the politics starts coming into the grand solar minimum. With the economy.
You know, when you were talking about protein, I did not know this fact, but do you know what the rarest thing in the universe is? And very few, in fact, we've never found it anywhere else. Protein. It's only here on Earth. Think about that.
It was engineered from the beginning.
Think about it. Protein, you know, it's apparently Earth made only. So now see, I haven't heard this, because now pork prices, they seem high here, but you know, I never have. I'm going to look into this more. What we are seeing as well, because I watched this, is, for instance, honey. Now, back in the day, we have stored this. We have about 5-gallon buckets of honey. It's becoming much more difficult to buy, and it's definitely gotten very much more expensive. I see this as a part of this continued collapse going into this grand solar minimum.
Yeah, here they've come up to, now they're cutting it with high fructose corn syrup. So,
really?
Yeah, you know, buyer beware. A lot of cuttings going on at the moment, because the natural honey's just not there.
Exactly.
So, yeah, so what are they going to do? They're still trying to sell products. So I am very careful, and a few people who help me buy honey, we go directly to the producer. It's family, friends. They've known them forever. And
yeah. We
You
have
got to trust them as much as you can trust them. I mean,
yeah. Holy crap. And
yeah, the cutting, and again, Wayne, think about this. As we go down, the shrinkflation is going to only take it so far.
right.
And then there's going to start being the cut in the actual, they're going to fill it with something. And then what are they going to fill it with? That's the next question.
Well, here in the United States, I see we're in a very precarious position. We have homelessness on the rise. It's literally, it's a pandemic. We see the healthcare system collapsing under the burden of primarily debt, superinflation as well. And I have a family member that was a truck driver carrying long hauls over the road. And they're seeing some strange things. The agriculture is much more reduced in the freight. And I keep asking myself, so is there a correlation? I mean, if the truckers aren't hauling the produce and what have you, if they're seeing a reduction of it, what is that saying as well?
It's just not there.
It's just not there.
It's not there. Look, you can see it again from the very beginning of the spring. The wipeout of lettuce over in California. You got the wipeout of the blueberry crop up in Prince Edward Island. You got wipeout of different kind of crops wherever you look. And remember, it's fruit and vegetables and berries.
Yeah.
There's no pipeline for those. I mean, yeah, you can get the dried blueberries, but look at the price of the berries now. I mean, it's exponentially risen. You used to get a nice big bag, or even a little, you can get a little container for $3-4, a nice fresh blueberries. Now the thing's at $8-9 for a little. Wow, why did that triple in price?
Yeah, yeah, and that's just the next thing to this. You said something that's really interesting: the high fructose syrup being mixed in with the honey. I believe that the time is going to come. We're going to find out how much of that. And this is just my opinion, and I'll say why. Over here, diabetes is out of control. You have adolescent diabetes, you have children's diabetes, you have late-term diabetes for adults. And call me just a conspiracy theorist. Oh, that's right. If you're that here in the United States, you're that this is being purposely fed to the population. I think it's poison, to be honest with you.
I'll agree. It's over here in Asia too. I mean, everywhere you go across the planet, that is in the food supply. Just, it's in there. And there's.
Now,
I'm gonna agree with you, because when you take a look at how easy it is to control a population that's sick, think about all what's in the water with all the plastics, and then with the whatever is the fluoride in the water in the United States, and now these new reports coming out just a couple of weeks ago showing that fluoridated water lowers the IQ in the fetus, and then after birth and then through life it has a lower IQ, the baby that's born. This is real science. I can't believe they even put that study out. I was shocked that I read that, and it was from the American Medical Association about 2 weeks ago, and they had been pushing for 7 or 9 years to try to keep that thing shelved. Why did it come out right now? See, this is the things I don't understand, is everything has just been waiting in the wings. Like, we've known about all this contamination, everything for decades, plural, and then suddenly it's released right now. Yeah. Why is that? What's the thing about this year? There's been so much release of, the inner workings of the elite and how demonic they are, and the practices they're doing. And now they got the fluoridated water verified now. It's not anymore. It was before, right? Yeah. Yeah. 5G, wireless now. Yeah, mobile phones, they do have an effect on your brain. Oh, why is all this being released right now? It makes no sense. Like, why are all these reports coming this year? Unusual.
I did a video called Terraforming Earth. And David, if you step back and do the whiteboards, I have them all through my office. That's what I did. It has all the indications our planet is being transformed.
I'll agree.
And I don't think it's for us. I don't. And I'm going to say this because I want to really be sensitive on this. Here in the United States, it's everywhere, but there are certain in the population that I have seen a disturbing aspect of what we're feeding them. Now, everyone here knows that most of the food consumed by Americans is highly processed food. And that contains exactly what you were saying, high fructose syrup in all of it. And the obesity, particularly as we're seeing now in certain, is, I can't help but almost think that these people are being almost targeted for early death by the food they're eating.
Right, but that an ill population is much easier to control than a healthy thinking population that is very mobile and think about the strength in the body that could be a resistance force against something. And the terraforming, I absolutely agree. This place is being terraformed. But for what?
I don't know.
A higher vibrational frequency in the air so something else can jump into a physical form within a frequency grid? Or is it really another entity, like a physical, third-dimensional thing with walking legs or crawling, whatever it could be, to take form here and have a denser atmosphere, a more polluted whatever atmosphere? Something is very different. The way, just you can sense something different. It's almost like the frequency of the planet's changed as well. Because, I was talking to somebody about 5G, and I was saying, imagine if they put 5G in every single city, and it doesn't have to be the largest cities such as New York and Atlanta and LA, but everywhere in between as well, smaller second, third tier cities. And if they had all the frequency and all the cities across the planet all fired up at the same time, could that actually affect the vibration frequency of the planet? Now, somebody said no. But I was thinking, well, maybe on the thin veneer of the crust it could, but maybe further denser down into the layers of the mantle it might not. But on the very surface, in that one little tiny layer, it very well could. So something's being set for something else to habit this zone on the surface here.
As we were talking, I can't help the conversation that back in the day where Gordy Rose, co-founder of D-Wave Computer Systems, and he said when they had announced the breakthrough that they had actually broken through into other dimensions, and I quote, pulled substance back from these other dimensions into this one. He said that when they turned it on the first time, the quantum computer, he said it was as if they were kneeling before an alien god. Now, if we start looking at this, I contend, and it's been my theory, that on November 9th, 2016, the whole planet literally shifted. And I keep seeing today, it's like a bell that's rung. We're just seeing the reverberations, and they're continuing. Now, I could be completely off the wall on this, but quantum computing is real. They're now got quantum conscious computing. I found this out yesterday. I'm trying to determine what that actually is. But I contend, David, that there's so much happening at the same time. You can't tell me that this is randomness. I won't accept that.
Yeah, nor will I. CERN and that Hadron Collider as well. They had the reports of an entity appearing inside there as well, and then things running around and shadow figures and different things that just don't seem correct in our what we would consider perception of waking reality, that there was a shift in dimension on that as well. So think about it, it's happening in a couple different places. So with the D-Wave and with the new computing power coming in, and then also at CERN where there two spots are bringing entities in, and now we're getting the 5G network. It's all a little too coincidental that this frequency grid can hold something else in a frequency inside it with the up to what's it, 37 gigahertz?
Mm-hmm.
We've never gone that high before. Do we really know what it's going to do when you start triangulating it in and holding the frequency pattern in there on not an area like this big or somewhere, the size of a building like in CERN or even underground? We're talking about an entire city or bigger, an entire country. What can inhabit that zone at that point?
I know this sounds off the wall, but I could never figure out why Spielberg did this. He did a very B-rated movie called Howard the Duck, and you ought to go watch it because the premise of this was that we had used an accelerated particle spreader, and it opened a door to a new dimension. And now in the movie, they were called the Dark Overlords, and they were able to actually come in energy form, and that was their big thing. They had to find an energy source. And you ought to check it out sometimes. But watch it from the point that, could it be possible that at CERN, now there has been theories that when we opened those portals that first time, that they did say that there was something there.